Hello, friends. This is Dolores Williams of DW's View Stand Up. If we do not stand up for what we believe, who will? This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. Welcome to DW's View Stand Up. I want to thank my sponsor, Ms. Kim Yater. My sponsor, Kim, is also my peak performance coach. If you're feeling stuck in any part of your life, and you just don't know which way to go, then you need to contact my coach, Kim Yater, and ask for a complimentary strategy session. You can contact Kim at Calendly, CALENDLY.com/Kim, KIMYEATER. It's okay to be stuck, but it's not okay to stay stuck. And to you, my audience, I want to thank you for coming and listening at DW's View one more time. I appreciate you coming each week. And today you are going to be blown, your socks are going to be blown off because we have a very special guest today. And I'll tell you, you're going to love him as much as we do. His name is Richard Bailey. And Richard was born and raised in San Diego. He's a graduate of Steel Canyon High School, same school my grandson graduated from about 5 years ago. Richard was selected as one of San Diego County's 40 leaders under 40 years old in 2018. He currently serves as mayor of Coronado. In his free time, his passions are exercise and the outdoors. He is currently training for his next marathon in December. He hopes to qualify for the Boston Marathon. He also plans to climb Mount Aconcagua. Is that how you say that? Aconcagua in Argentina. You can correct me on the saying of that. That's the highest mountain in the Americas, and also the summit mount for Mount Everest in the future. Dear friends, help me welcome my friend, Richard Bailey. Richard, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Dolores. Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Now we're going to jump right in because I want to have a great discussion with you today. But first, I want to just find out. Now, your parents live here in San Diego. I know you grew up here.
I did. I grew up over in La Mesa, so the East County part of San Diego. And my mom, she still lives over in Fletcher Hills. My dad has passed a few years ago, but my mom and my sister and brother-in-law all live over in La Mesa.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. What a blessing to have family close by.
It really is.
Yeah. Now, now you've been fiscally conservative. Would you attribute growing up in a conservative home as a contributing to your thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. Both my parents were they worked for themselves. So my father had his own masonry contractor business, and my mom was a real estate agent. So they were, they really had to kind of make their dollars stretch out during times. And so because of that, we didn't live a very lavish lifestyle, and they really watched every dollar as it came in and every dollar as it went out. So just seeing how they budgeted our household account, I think really made a difference to how I see, an appropriate way to live a fiscally responsible lifestyle.
Yeah, well, that's great because it certainly has paid off in the job that you're doing as mayor of Coronado.
Yeah, there are a lot of, I'm a big believer in just keeping things simple. And there are a lot of similarities between running a household and, running a business or running a local government. You can't spend more than you take in for too long without running into some serious problems.
Yeah, well, I tell you, we got some serious problems in America.
We sure do.
Now, Coronado is a military city, and we have people in special services who want, and we talk about Afghanistan. I want to bring that up first in light of the tragedy that happened yesterday. But now we have special services, people who want to go in and get the American people out of there, but they're not allowed to do that. And I think it's pretty serious because we have till the 31st, I believe, to get all of the Americans out of Afghanistan. They say who want to get out. I don't know who want to stay there. First of all, and I definitely want to keep those 13 families and all the other people who died and the ones who were injured, keep them in prayer because that was tragic what happened. Now, it just saddens my heart. Now, you work in a city, Coronado, that is a military town.
That's right. The city of Coronado is the largest naval base in the continental U.S. on the West Coast. And so we have a very strong Navy presence. We also are the birthplace of naval aviation. So naval aviation got its start here in Coronado over 100 years ago. And we're also the birthplace of every single Navy SEAL that serves our nation. So the way it works is if you're interested in becoming a U.S. Navy SEAL, you go through your trainings here in Coronado, and then if you complete those trainings successfully, you are stationed either here in Coronado or over in Virginia Beach. So many of the men that work in our special forces are based here in Coronado, and so it's a real honor to to be a place where they call home. So we are a very proud Navy town, very proud of the men and women that serve our country. So yeah, on the topic of Afghanistan, having had the chance to speak to several of them that have served and like were deployed over in Afghanistan. One person I spoke with actually yesterday was in Afghanistan as recently as just 6 months ago, and they're all pretty devastated by the administration's response to the self-imposed deadline, and they feel as though there's a real lack of leadership and proper planning to adequately, if the plan was to, or if the objective was to, completely remove the U.S. presence from Afghanistan, that they thought they did it, the Biden administration did this in a very haphazard way, which of course is leading to a lot of the chaos that we see now. So they're very disappointed, especially because it puts a lot of their fellow service members in harm's way. So it's a real sad situation all around, from the Americans that are still there that are trying to get out, the service members who are trying to protect them and create some type of orderly process. And then of course for all the Afghanis that worked alongside our men and women and that are now unfortunately essentially facing a death sentence if they're not evacuated.
Yeah, that's just sad. It's so sad. I was listening to President Trump last night on the Hannity show, and where they try to blame him for the drawdown. President Trump would never have done that. Right. As he stated, I had a plan, and they never would have given up that airport either. And right. So he had a plan to get our people out safely, but not pull the military out and leave these people defenseless. He never would have done that.
Right, and it does seem to be a major strategic blunder to say that August 31st is the date we are getting out, and because that just gives the Taliban an opportunity to plan around that date. And I was also disappointed when the Biden administration was initially asked, well, what happens after August 31st? And the response is, well, it's kind of up to the Taliban. And it's like, wait a second here. We're either the world's most powerful armed forces for liberty, or we're not. And the notion that some ragtag barbarians can dictate terms to us is insulting, that our leadership would actually take that as opposed to just saying, no, we're going to be there as long as needed to get our men and women out of harm's way, and anyone that tries to stop us is going to face justice immediately. And so it feels as though we're having this ragtag group of barbarians kind of push around the United States of America, which really, I think, calls into question our credibility around the world.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So we just keep them in prayer.
Absolutely.
It's certainly needed. Yeah. Now, and why did you end up going to college at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, where you graduated with a business finance degree?
Yeah, because I was from East County, San Diego, from the San Diego area, I had some family friends that had graduated from Cal Poly that were older than me. And so I just decided to take a tour of the campus one day. And if any of you have been to San Luis Obispo before, it's just such a beautiful area. It's kind of got the small town charm to it. It's right on the coast, close to the mountains. So as someone that likes to live an active lifestyle and always up for doing anything outdoors, it just really kind of called to me. And so I decided to it was either between there or San Diego State, and I thought it'd be important to get away from home a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I really enjoyed my time up there. And yeah, I still go back and visit pretty often, at least once or twice a year.
Oh, great. Great. Yeah, I have some friends that have a family that live over there.
It's beautiful, right?
I've never been there. I
Oh my
heard
gosh,
so much
Dolores,
about
you
it,
gotta
but I've never
go.
been there.
Make it a little weekend trip.
Yeah, I have to put that on the bucket list.
There you go.
Yeah. Now, how hard was it for you to work and then go to school online and receive your master's from the University of North Dakota? Was that a
Yeah, so after graduating from Cal Poly, eventually made my way back down here to San Diego, and I started at San Diego State in their graduate program for economics. And right in the middle of one of my semesters, I was offered a great job with a company called United Technologies. They've since been acquired by Raytheon, and I just had to take the job. At the time, I think it was the year 2009 or 10, and the job market was just not great. And so to be offered a very great job from this wonderful company, I had to take it. But since I was in the middle of my semester at San Diego State, I had to basically stop attending classes at State. So at the time, the only accredited online program for a master's in economics was through the University of North Dakota. Since then, of course, many universities offer accredited master's programs. And so, yeah, I would go to school, or excuse me, I would go to work each day, and then would just take one class a semester for a couple of years until I finished it up. And it was a challenge. I mean, master level programs, especially ones that are have a certain master level programs are just really difficult. And I did find this one to be especially a challenge. Proofing out different formulas was not something I would wish upon anyone, because it was not fun. It was not easy. But a lot of the skill sets I learned there, I actually wrote my kind of capstone project on comparing the effectiveness of public transit on highway congestion. So what we did is we actually measured the level of congestion on some of our major highways here in San Diego County before and then after a major transit line was installed adjacent to it. And what we found is that traffic congestion on highways actually got worse after these transit lines were installed for hundreds of millions of dollars. And so
Wow.
it was kind of fun to be able to apply the skill sets, the econometrics learned through this graduate program to public policy that I was working on. So it was a great program, and I would recommend it to anyone that is kind of interested in public policy and looking for a way to evaluate whether or not certain policies are effective.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like a lot of people that are serving in these on these city boards need to do that.
Right. Yeah, no kidding.
Now, you as a professional, you are an adjunct professor at the University of San Diego. Now, do you also challenge your students? Oh, wait, let me go back, because I definitely want to ask you this. How did the challenge by one of your friends in college encourage you to understand the reasons behind your political affiliations by reading books for yourself and not just depending on mom and dad or what you were taught in your past?
Yeah.
And so how did that challenge you, to go out there and learn it for yourself, not just say, mom told me to do this, they told me to go this way. So right. The books that you read and all that influence.
Yeah. So back when I was in high school, it was the year 2000. I would come home from school each day, and my mom would be glued to the TV set, and she'd be watching the Bush first score recount. And there was one state, Florida, that had these outstanding ballots that needed to be counted. And so my mom would be glued to the TV set watching as each result came in. And I would ask my mom, hey, mom, who are we rooting for? And she told me, hey, we're rooting for George Bush. And I asked why. And she said, well, because, honey, we're Republicans and you're a Republican too. And that was really the extent of my depth in terms of politics and understanding where, how and who to vote for. But when I got to college, one of my great friends, his name is Jeremy, and Jeremy was a philosophy major. And so we'd had these great kind of high-minded conversations, and he really challenged me on the depth of why I thought the way I thought. And he told me, he said, Richard, it's not enough to be a quote Republican because your mom is a Republican. Like, where does government derive its authority from? What is the proper role of government? And these were questions that I had never, ever even considered. So I'm really grateful to have met Jeremy, become friends with him, and for him to pose these questions, because he introduced me a couple different books. One was written by John Locke, and another one was written by this French philosopher and economist named Frederick Bastiat, who wrote a book called The Law. And those two books really kind of helped answer those two questions for me and became kind of the foundation of my ideology. So I was no longer a Republican because, quote, my mom was Republican, but I really started understanding the importance of limiting government and conserving government, and making sure that, that the role of government was to allow people to live the lives they chose to live, not imposing, governments or the persons in charge of government's own will on others. So that's probably the biggest lesson I learned while in school.
Oh, great. Now, are you challenging your students to do the same thing?
Absolutely. So I really enjoy being an adjunct professor over at USD. It's one of the highlights of my weeks when we're in semester. And I love to pose big controversial questions to them, and then really have them define the terms within those questions so that everyone's operating on the same page. Do some research to get the underlying data that's necessary to answer that question effectively, and then go ahead and answer that question. And so, yeah, I really try to help them learn how to think and how to ask questions versus telling them what to think, and just kind of seeing where that leads us. So it's a highlight of my time.
Yeah, that's great. That is great. So it sounds like you're going to have an impact on young people of the future.
That's the hope.
In a positive way.
I think so.
Yeah. Now, in 2012, as a 2-year resident of Coronado, why did you decide to run for the city council? And you also blessed with your employer, United Technologies, which was lenient. I mean, you told me with your schedule. So why did you decide to run for the city council?
Yeah, great question. So I was 26 years old at the time, and I had this great job with this great employer. And the employer encouraged employees to pursue passions outside of work. So when I was 26, it was June of 2012, and I was driving home from an election night party that had just happened during the night of the primary in 2012. And I just kind of felt this calling to have more of a say in how our government operated than simply casting a vote every 2 years. So I was driving home from this election night party, and I just thought, you know what, hey, you know how campaigns work. You love Coronado. You're planning to be here for the foreseeable future. So why not make a difference in your own community? And it was really as simple as that. And so after I got home that night, the next day I looked into what it takes to actually file paperwork to run for your local city council. And a short time later, I was off to the races, just knocking on doors and trying to convince voters why I might be the right choice for them.
Yeah, well, it looked like they made the right decision.
Yeah, I hope so.
Now, being on the city council, I know you served there for a few years. And how hard was it for you to transition from that, not just stay on the city council? You could have just stayed on there longer, right?
Right.
So then you decided, well, I'm doing this. I might as well run for mayor.
Right.
So, and you were elected with 99.16% of the vote. And also you're blessed to be serving your second term now. And at the age of 30, you were the youngest person to serve as mayor.
That's right.
And I just want to kudos to you for being a young person and taking a stand at such an early age.
You know what, that is a quick story for you. So when I first started running for city council, I decided to try to meet with all of the influencers within our community. So the people that have been on the school board, our local commissions, former council members, and they all told me the same thing. They all said, hey, you seem like a really nice guy, but you won't be elected. No one knows who you are. You should take this other path instead. You know, get appointed to a commission. Wait 4, 6, 8 more years. You're just too young. No one will take you seriously. And it occurred to me that, you know, no one knows for sure. Like, these are all great people that have some experience, but they don't have my experience and they don't have my vision, and they just see things a little bit differently than I do. And so I took everything with kind of a grain of salt, but I appreciated their feedback and I incorporated it into how I was going to conduct myself. And then fast forward 4 years later, when I was 30, there was an opening. Our former mayor was termed out. And so I thought, gosh, I could have a bigger impact as mayor than as a council member. And so I ran for the seat. And I can remember a lot of those same people saying, hey, you know, you're too young. You need to pay your dues. You've only been on the council for 4 years. It's someone else's turn. Let them have it. No one's going to vote for you. And then we ended up winning that seat by 11%. And then this most recent time, we just ran for re-election. And, you know, we're fortunate that over the last 8 years, we had a really strong track record of kind of keeping all of our promises, being really engaged with the community, having these town forums to make sure people felt like they were part of the process. And so when it came time to run for re-election for mayor, we ended up not having really much of any competition. Like you mentioned, we won with over 99% of the vote. And I attribute that to just a steadfast commitment to the way we've been conducting ourselves since day one when we first ran for city council, and not letting people who doubt you or doubt your vision interfere with actually executing it. And I think that's just really important to know that when you feel really committed to something, if you put together a good plan, like, you can achieve it. There's no reason you can't.
Yeah, well, you've done an excellent job. That's why all those people voted for you.
That's right. We hope so. We tried.
Hey, if I lived on Coronado, I'd vote for you too.
Thanks, Dolores. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Now, there are a few things I want you to tell us about. And the reason I wanted to talk to you is to give hope to some of the cities and counties around the country where so much corruption in government. I wanted to bring you on because you are an example of how to run a city. Now, in your second term as mayor, would you discuss, I wanted to bring up these subjects. Now, the first one is, now you have secured a $300 million commitment to clean up the Tijuana sewage crisis. How is that going?
That is, my previous meeting today, we were just actually talking about that. So for those viewers or listeners that might not be aware, for the last 80 plus years, the sewage problem in Tijuana, that is really a result of a very large population with very limited infrastructure, has caused raw sewage to flow into something called the Tijuana River Valley, which crosses both the US and Mexico border and ultimately ends up on our side of the border, where we have all this raw sewage that gets dumped out into the ocean, and then depending on the currents, it'll travel north. This has been going on for 80 years. And on average, every single year, we receive about 120 days out of the whole year of raw sewage that flows from Mexico into the US. So about 3 years ago, myself and a couple other mayors from the county, and also former supervisor Greg Cox, we got together and we started made a real concerted effort going back and forth to Washington, D.C. to try to figure out exactly which federal agency was responsible for this. Because we, as a local city, we couldn't solve it because it's an international issue. And so we worked with our congressional delegation, we worked with the Environmental Protection Agency, and it was really the Trump appointment to the EPA that helped us get our start. They made this a priority for the administration and really took ownership of it. And after a couple of years of understanding all of the underlying issues and who had jurisdiction and who did not, and where could potential funding come from, we were able to convince the federal government to appropriate $300 million through the USMCA to invest in infrastructure down there. And so right now, they've just completed their first, the EPA has just completed its first value assessment of the different proposals to clean up the region. And they've narrowed it down to 3. So within the next 18 to 24 months, you're going to see shovel in the ground to actually solve this problem. And I think that's a perfect example of government actually working to do what government's supposed to do. And yeah, I wish, of course, it would happen a lot sooner, but it's a huge step in the right direction, and it's just a matter of time now.
Oh, that's great. I know the citizens are going to be very happy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Not just our citizens too, but also the U.S. Border Patrol, the men and women that serve along the border have to work in this stuff.
Oh.
The special forces of our U.S. Navy SEALs, they have to train in these waters.
Yeah.
So to clean this up for them too, it's a real honor to help be a part of that process.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Now, tell us about the relinquishment of the SR 75 and SR 282, how are those progressing? Sure.
So anyone that's driven through Coronado has driven on what's known as Orange Avenue. Orange Avenue is our nice 4-lane street down our business district. That is actually not a residential street. That is actually a state highway.
Oh.
And so that highway is owned by the state of California, and which is both good and bad. Good in the sense it's their responsibility to take care of it. Bad in the sense it's their responsibility to take care of it. So they don't usually take care of it as well as we would like it to be taken care of. There's also limitations for how we can reconfigure that street to improve the safety and aesthetics of it. So a few years ago, we started working towards pursuing local control over those state highways. And we're right on the cusp of actually achieving that. It requires some state legislation for them to turn the roads or turn the highways over to us as roads. And once that happens, we'll have a lot more flexibility on what we can do there. So that's going to be that was a really big push for us because local control is just so important. And we're seeing local control stripped away from cities and counties by the state of California, which is something that everyone, regardless of party affiliation, should be fighting against. And the reason they should be fighting against this is because the best decisions happen at the local level. Your representatives at the local level, whether it's school board or city council or mayor, are all much easier to hold accountable when they're closer to home versus decisions being made up in Sacramento. So I would encourage everyone, regardless of party affiliation, to advocate for local control. And that way the communities can have these conversations and decide what issues should go which way for them, as opposed to one size fits all issues for the state of California.
Yeah, that, and that's true with the federal government as well, who want to control every part of our lives and have top down just telling us what you can and can't do.
That's right.
And so I just think it's terrible. Now how is a $1 million community grant program that's helping the citizens of Coronado? How's that one going?
Yeah, so the city of Coronado, we're in a very strong financial position, and we rely heavily on our community organizations to help with different community initiatives. And so we have gone ahead and we allocate about $1 million a year to help these organizations accomplish their missions for the betterment of our community. Now, several years ago, there was zero oversight to how this money was spent. There was really zero accountability for whether or not organizations actually achieved their stated mission. And so several years ago, after becoming the mayor, I said, hey, we need to do better. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our residents to make sure their tax dollars are being spent in an effective manner. And right now, we don't really have a process in place for making sure that happens. So we went ahead and put that process in place. And one of the benefits of having a process in place with our community grants is that we now have more organizations that are applying. So there's more competition for these funds, which is ultimately a better benefit to the community and the residents that these organizations serve. So that was one of our policy initiatives that I'm really proud of, because it was not an easy lift. You had a really concentrated special interest, if you will, that had for years always received the same payout from the city, but didn't necessarily perform. And now that there's this oversight, you're seeing performance go up, you're seeing new ideas emerge, and you're seeing these new groups come out, offering to be part of the solution. So it's been an example of what good governance produces.
Oh, that's great. Now,
Yeah.
now talk about the refinancing of the community development agency bonds and how that affects the schools in the Coronado community.
Yeah, this is one of those examples of two things that you would think would be completely unrelated to one another end up being extremely related. And the state of California has these complicated funding mechanisms for schools. So schools are not funded by cities. Schools are funded by the state. However, if a city had formed what's known as a redevelopment agency, which pretty much every city did in California up until about 2012 when the state got rid of them. If a city had a redevelopment agency and that redevelopment agency had money owed to it, or not effectively winded down that redevelopment agency, the school districts within that jurisdiction of the redevelopment agency would receive less funding than their peers in other schools, even though the school districts themselves didn't oftentimes have really anything to do with the redevelopment agencies. So it gets super complicated and super convoluted, but the punchline is that the city of Coronado, on behalf of our redevelopment agency, went ahead and refinanced out of some long-term obligations. And by doing that, we shortened the window so that now our schools will be able to receive more funding for our students' education in the very near future. And so that was also a really big and complicated lift involving working with the state. But we were able to do it. And it's probably one of those issues that most people will never fully understand because it is so complicated. It's so bureaucratic, but it will make a phenomenal difference for the students in Coronado.
Oh, great. Now, how would you compare the successful governance in Coronado compared to other cities and in the government? Also, you have advice for other cities how to be successful.
The best advice I would give other cities, including ourselves, and we have to remind ourselves of this from time to time, is look, the government's not that hard. It's really not. I'm a big believer in staying in your own lane. And as a city, our lane is to provide for the public safety, it's to provide for sound infrastructure, and it's to accomplish those first two objectives in a financially responsible manner. If we can do those three things, then pretty much 90% of everything else takes care of itself. Too often, I think government at the local, state, and federal level focus on issues that aren't their core responsibilities. And because of that, it takes away from them actually executing on what their core responsibilities are. And so it produces a lower outcome than it otherwise should. So my advice would be to stay in your lane, focus on what you're supposed to do, and be really good at that. Don't try to be everything to everyone, because if you do, you'll end up being nothing to no one. So yeah, stay in your lane.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah. Now this was a nationwide event that happened, or rather was all on the news, about the Coronado High School Tortilla Throw incident between the basketball team at Coronado and Orange Glen. Is there a case pending in that? And how did that turn out?
Yeah, this is still ongoing. The school districts for both Orange Glen and Coronado High are still investigating. But this is an example of that old saying, a lie can get halfway around the world before the truth puts its pants on. There was a 5-second video clip that appeared to show the Coronado High School basketball varsity team throwing tortillas at a predominantly Hispanic high school over in Escondido after the conclusion of a championship game. And so after this 5-second clip went out, you had all these condemnations from elected officials and leaders within San Diego. There was protests outside of Coronado High School. People were saying, oh, the whole basketball team is racist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. However, after just a few days of looking at all of the evidence, what turned out to happen was this: a a gentleman named Luke Cerna, who's half Hispanic, attended UCSB back when he went to college, and at UCSB and other nations, or excuse me, at UCSB and other universities, throwing tortillas is an act of celebration. So he had brought these tortillas. He graduated Coronado High School about 20 plus years ago. And so he had brought tortillas to the Coronado High School Boys Varsity Basketball Championship with the intention of throwing them into the air at the conclusion of the game if Coronado won. Not throwing them at any players, but throwing them up into the air in celebration. At the conclusion of the game, it was a last second buzzer beater shot. It was a highly contentious game, and Coronado ended up winning. There was a celebration that took place on the court, and as that celebration was kind of winding down and both teams made their way back to their respective benches, words were exchanged between the two coaches. The opposing team and their players and fans made their way over to Coronado's side of the court. There was a bit of pushing and shoving and some words being exchanged. And then two individuals who were not actually on the Coronado High School varsity team picked up a handful of tortillas that had been left there by the guy that brought them, and they tossed them into the air indiscriminately over the crowd that had formed. And that was pretty much the extent of it. There was no racial motivation. It was an example of classism or elitism or colorism or anything that, any of these isms that people had claimed it was. It was just a highly contentious game where things got out of hand at the end. And so it was really unfortunate that the narrative that took hold after that really took away from the amazing seasons that both of these teams had. Coronado gets oftentimes, I think, is perceived as being predominantly white, a white community. I think that's where a lot of these kind of accusations came from. But when you look at our student body, for example, we have a lot of Hispanics within our schools. The captain of our basketball team is just a fine young man that happens to be Black. Another outstanding player that hit the game-winning shot, he's half Black, half Hispanic. There's a couple of Asian kids on the team. So it's a very diverse team. So the notion that this team would now be racist for the acts of people that weren't even on the team is kind of makes you scratch your head. So now that all this evidence has come out, fortunately, some governing bodies have decided to retract their previous statements, issue apologies, and hopefully the truth will eventually all come out, like it always does, and hopefully the media will cover it the same way they covered the initial incident.
Yeah. Now they put fines on your basketball team, that they stripped them of the title and all that.
They did. So CIF, which is the governing body that oversees high school sports in the state of California, they, without doing any investigation whatsoever, without interviewing a single player or personnel involved, made the unilateral decision to strip the high school basketball team of its championship. And the school board has appealed that decision, and we're waiting the results of that appeal.
Yeah, well, I wish them the best, because I kind of followed it in the news a little bit, and then I heard that they wanted to teach CRT to the students. Within minutes of this incident, you had people on the political left in Coronado stating that CRT should be basically stating, see, this is why we need CRT in our classrooms, when it turned out it had nothing to do with race whatsoever. Yeah. See, there you go. Things get out of hand unnecessarily.
That's right.
Now, with you being so fiscally conservative, does Coronado have a balanced budget?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We have a balanced budget. We routinely run surpluses. We have zero debt, and we have the lowest city assessed sales tax, property tax, and business tax rates in the state of California. In fact, we couldn't lower our taxes any more than they already are. We're at the state mandated minimum. So yeah, we've done a good job managing our revenues and expenses and not forcing our taxpayers to pay for more.
Yeah, well, great. I hope they'll always keep a good people in politics over there to keep that going.
We do too.
Now, you've announced plans to run for Congress against Scott Peters in the 52nd congressional race. And we followed him for years. Now, what skills and policies would you bring to that seat if you're elected, and what's missing?
Well, I think probably, the biggest thing that's missing, and this goes back to the lesson I mentioned earlier, is that the federal government seems to be trying to be everything to everyone. The federal government is trying to be in the business of education, business of healthcare, um, and and the fact that in the business of retirement. And the fact of the matter is, the federal government is not good at very many things. And they're really not good at the stuff they're supposed to be good at, right? Securing our border, foreign policy, protecting our, defending our nation from attacks, both physical attacks, but also cybersecurity threats. They're supposed to be good at the court system. And you just don't see policies that are where they should be, as a nation. And instead, the national dialogue is talking about issues that aren't really even federal issues, or they shouldn't be federal issues. So I think that probably the biggest difference between, say, my philosophy and other members of Congress right now is that I believe we should be sticking in our own lane as the federal government. Let's focus on the things we should be good at, and let the private sector, let communities, let states take care of everything else. Because right now we're not good at too many things, and we should be a lot better.
Yeah, well, hey, Richard, you must be pulling your hair out right now looking at the spending and the trillions of dollars that Nancy Pelosi's and the Dems and some Republicans. I mean, this is a problem with all of them. Spending trillions of dollars. I mean, I'm not a financial expert, but man, I know that is crazy to be spending trillions of dollars and just destroying the country with all that.
And here's where it's really sad to see. You're seeing record inflation compared to what we had all the way back to the 1980s. And inflation really robs people of their savings, and it hurts lower income people the most, because it makes everything more expensive. And coming on the heels of this COVID pandemic, which disproportionately affected lower income communities because it put a lot of people out of work, to now basically be inflating the currency to rob them of whatever savings they did have, is really a gross injustice. It's a terrible management of the economy, and it hurts those that can least afford it the most. So these are the types of things that really have to get under control in the short, medium, and long-term future in order for our nation to be successful.
Yeah, I said, with the way that they're spending, we're not going to have a nation.
Right.
The amount of money, my goodness, they throw trillion around as though it's $5 or something.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to, when I introduce you, I wanted you to talk more a little bit. I know we're going to end pretty soon. You got a meeting to go to. But just tell us quickly about your mountain climbing and all those things. I mean, that was so exciting to know that you're doing that.
Yeah, I recently got into mountaineering. I hiked to Everest Base Camp a couple months ago, and so got to see the summit from the base camp. And I just felt a calling to go to the top one day. I love a big challenge. I love a big, especially a big outdoor endurance challenge. I love marathons and triathlons, so mountaineering is kind of like the next evolution of that. And so I've contacted an expedition team, and we've lined up several climbs, including the one you mentioned, Aconcagua, down in Argentina. And so we have several climbs lined up that will, give me the skill sets and the training necessary to one day take a shot at the summit of Everest. So that's on my bucket list.
Oh, great. That is wonderful. Wonderful. Well, Richard, I have enjoyed talking to you. Just so great. George and I really love you. And just we look forward to seeing you, whenever we get the chance. You're such a pleasure to be around and such a pleasant young man. So just keep on going and doing what you're doing.
Dolores, thank you so much. It means the world to me. I love seeing you and George around as well. And I always appreciate your energy and just your general disposition of just being very happy.
Amen. Amen. You have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
I think one of the highlights one of the silver linings of this COVID pandemic has been people are more engaged than ever before. They're having a better understanding of where decisions are made and who makes those decisions. And so I would encourage all of your listeners and viewers to find out who are their school board representatives, who are their city council representatives, and reach out to them and get to know them and develop those relationships that you can then use to help influence public policy.
Yeah, that's a great idea, because I was looking at San Diego Unified is with the mask policy,
Mhm.
forcing the children even outdoors to
Right.
have, I mean, anyway, I won't get into that. But anyway, thank you, Richard, so
My
much
pleasure.
for coming. And I want to thank my audience for coming and listening. You got to listen to this interview and just share it with your friends, you know. And each week, if you want to be a sponsor, I would love to have you sponsor DW's View. And also share this message with your friends. And each week, I challenge my listeners to stand up. Get the facts for yourself, but don't be afraid to stand up, and not just stand for anything, but stand up for what's right. Because guess what? If we do not stand up, who will?